In this video, we will discuss and explore the execution model or mechanism which is implemented in Node.js. The execution model of Node.js is typically based on JavaScript Event loop, where it creates a continuous loop and executes them one after the other. Node.js adopted the single-threaded model so as to ensure scalability because scaling multi-threaded applications is a large challenge and they generally incur extra overhead. Now, the execution model of Node.js is based on the JavaScript callback mechanism, which is used generally by AJAX-based applications. The typical request processing flow is illustrated with this sample processing figure. The client sends their request to Node.js, following which Node.js will store their request in an event queue. Then it will decide whether it is blocking or non-blocking I/O. If it is a blocking I/O, it will be processed by passing the request to the block resources, like the database, file system, and MOMs and others. If it is a non-blocking I/O, it will be processed within the event loop, and after the response is sent, they will be managed using a callback mechanism. So the components that play an important part in requesting processing includes the event queue, which manages the events, followed by Node.js event loop, which contains the mechanism of managing the events one at a time. Now, the requests can be divided into blocking and non-blocking I/O. And these request types are managed differently, where the non-blocking I/O processes the tasks, and after the response is prepared, there will be a callback in order to send back the response. But in the case of blocking I/O, the request will be passed on to the block resources, and after the block resources processes the request, they will return the response. The execution steps involved in the execution model of Node.js is quite simple. Whenever a client sends requests, the request goes to the Node.js server, and in turn, it places the requests into the event queue, which is in the event processing queue. The Node.js server will then use JavaScript Event loop to process each and every one of the requests. And while the requests are being processed, the event loop will continue checking the event queue for further requests from the client. Now, if the requests do not require blocking operations, the event loop will process all the requests and send back responses to the client. But if the requests requires blocking operations, it will use the thread pools to process the required operations and send back the responses. Now let's explore components involved in the execution using this illustrated architectural sample of Node.js. There are two important components for request processing. The first one is for the thread pool, and the second one is for the event pool. These components are provided in the form of libov asynchronous module. Then V8 synchronizes with various important libraries in order to facilitate the capability of processing non-blocking and blocking resources. There are different phases involved in an event loop. The first phase involves the timers, and then it tracks the pending callbacks. Then in the third phase, it identifies the state to confirm whether it is idle or prepared, following which it begins polling, checks, and finally closes the callbacks. So all these steps or phases will be taken into account one after the other when there is an incoming connection, data, or any request.